Astăzi avem o ocazie de-a dreptul extraordinară de a cunoaște unul din fotografii de nuntă care și-au pus amprenta extrem de mult pe jurnalismul în branșa noastră, în ultimul secol chiar. Am avut ocazia să-l cunosc pe Jeff Ascough într-un DVD acum un secol, alături de nume foarte grele cum ar fi Jerry Ghionis sau Rob Hyman. Și atunci nu mi-a spus atât de mult pe cât îmi spune astăzi. Probabil că am mai îmbătrânit, probabil că amintirile de calitate au devenit cele reale și nu cele fabricate. În orice caz, îi vom pune câteva întrebări astăzi lui Jeff. Ne-am bucurat să vă fie de folos răspunsurile lui. Engleza mea nu e atât de inspirată și de finisată pe cât aș vrea să fie. Sper să înțelegeți întrebările, dar cu siguranță răspunsurile sunt cele importante. Abia îl așteptăm pe Jeff aici și mulțumim Canon pentru ocazia de a-l cunoaște și de a-l intervieva pentru voi.
My first question would be, how do you deal with this kind of fame? Because I read on your blog, on your website, people are calling you master or one of the best 5 or 10 photographers in the world. Does this fame interfere with your wedding photography? Does it influence you in good or bad?
I think it's, first of all, I think it's a very shallow thing. I don't think that any photographer sets out to be famous. I mean, some obviously do, but for me it's been a progression over 25 years to get to a certain level. And if people want to give you accolades, and if they want to call you this or call you that, and it's only opinions at the end of the day. If they want to do this, then for me it means that my work is meaning something to somebody, and that for me is more important than the accolades and the titles. Now obviously those sort of things are great for my own sort of business because obviously it sets me apart from other people, but I always started out as a photographer to do what I wanted to do, and I never wanted to copy what others were doing, and I never wanted to get in a situation where I could produce work and that people didn't realise it was my work. That's what I've always wanted to do. So when the accolades and everything came along, I see them for what they are, and I just see them as people appreciating my way of doing things, I guess, more than anything else. On a day-to-day basis, it doesn't make any difference. So we don't. The misconception is that we do huge amounts of big weddings with lots of money and lots of famous people, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Most of our clients are normal people, have normal, I would say very normal weddings. It's just that they really like the style of photography that we do. So it's not really a problem from that point of view.
How would you define, if it's possible, good wedding photography in your view?
I think people make an assumption about what is a wedding photograph. I think that's the first thing, that people assume that a wedding photograph contains a bride and a groom, for example, or it contains a posed photograph or something very formal or austere or something like that. I've always seen myself as a photographer first that just happens to go to weddings. So for me, a good wedding photograph should be the same as a good photograph. It just happens to be taken on the wedding day. So it should still be, first of all, it should be emotive. It should allow somebody to look at the photograph and to get something from it, to feel something from it. Then obviously it has to be lit well, it has to have good composition, it has to tell a story. But that's the same for any type of photography, any kind of documentary photography. That's what the photograph has to have. And for me, that's the same with weddings. Okay, there's no rules or formulas. It's just if it's a good photograph and it's taken on a wedding day, then that's a wedding photograph as far as I'm concerned.
That's a great answer. Yeah. Do you have? I always ask myself, do you have any plans before pressing the button? Is there some process of thinking before pressing the button?
Yeah, always, yes. I've never been a photographer that's. I believe there are two types of photographer. I believe there are reactive photographers, and I believe there are active photographers. And what I mean by that, a reactive photographer will very quickly take pictures, just see things and take pictures, and just usually take a lot of pictures, you know, in that way. And it kind of becomes a a little bit hit and miss as to what they actually achieve in terms of the photographs. I've always been a very methodical photographer. I've always actively looked for a shot, always looked for a situation, always looked for some composition or some lighting that interests me. And then what I'll do is very often just sit and wait and see what happens in that particular situation. And then when something does happen, then I become more reactive. Yeah, then that's when I start taking my photographs. So my photographs always start with something, whether it's some lighting or it's a shape or it's or even a conversation between two people in a particular area of a room, for example. Those were the sort of things that I would look for, and then I would wait and see what happens and then take the photograph from that point of view.
In the last 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of there are lots of images that put first the background. Let's say a great scenery or a great building with small bride and groom in one corner. But in your pictures, how do you treat the background in relation with the subject?
It depends on where it is, but the background for me has to tell part of the story. It has to be part of what's happening at that particular point. So when I'm looking for photographs, I'll be looking for elements within a background that can add to what I'm trying to say with the picture. And one of the things which I kind of think is part of my style is the way that I'm able to include elements, whether they be people or buildings or whatever, that have a relationship to whatever's happening in the foreground. The pictures that I know exactly the pictures you mean, they kind of, to me, that's not wedding photography. I don't see that, because the backgrounds are there just to put two people in. They don't say very much about the day or where it was taken or what was happening in that particular moment, but that's just a style thing. I mean, it's not my kind of thing, really.
If this is your kind of thing, how do you define the opposite?
In what respect?
Let's say you're a journalist.
Yeah.
How do you define the opposite of journalism? Because I have colleagues that say, for instance, we are journalists during some parts of the day, the wedding, and we try to set things up in some parts of the day. In your view, what's the difference? I'm not referring to is the exact result, the images that came from this effort, but what's the difference in terms of idea? There are more the stage pictures can represent the subject better than journalism, or not? No,
not at all. I don't think any stage photographs can represent. I think if you look at the kind of the psychology behind photography, okay, if a photographer goes to a set of pictures and they are looking to stage manage what's happening, then the wedding has suddenly become their idea of what it should be rather than what it actually is. It's a different skill set to do the two different types. I don't think you can do, or shall I say, I don't think you can. I think there are very few photographers in the world that do both as well as each other. I think you'll get photographers who are fantastic at stage managing and not so good on the journalism, and you get others that are very good on the journalism but not so good on the stage managing. I think the two mindsets are completely different. And I think that somebody that needs to stage manage the events, I think that their personality is much more in terms of wanting to create something, whereas something like a photojournalist wants to record something, and I think that's basically what the difference is.
That is what I was trying to ask you. Yeah, you answered perfectly. If you think about your inspiration sources, could you recommend us, let's say, a book or a movie, or what are the things that inspire you nowadays?
These days, well, it changes obviously as you get, as you grow old. Yeah, not so much of the old, but yeah, as you get on in your career, things change. And what influenced me as a 21-year-old have less of an influence now, because I've kind of been through that phase. The influences these days come from a wide range of things. I'm still heavily into my photographers, the photographers I enjoy looking at. These days, the work of Alex Webb, the Magnum photographer, just astounds me, just absolutely astounds me. The way that he uses layers and shapes and reflections. William Klein is another photographer which I've come to quite late, considering that he's been around for years and years. But his work at the moment has a real appeal. But I think the main thing for me has always been to try and look for things which stimulate the eye rather than specific photographers. So then I've got Instagram. My Instagram feed is a constant source of inspiration, the people I follow on there. And with regard to movies, movies are always something that I've been into. They're always, when my wife and I are relaxing, it's always movies, or movies. And things like, particularly films like by Ridley Scott, just amazing. I mean, the way that the guy uses space and things like that, just incredible. So I kind of look for things which interest me visually, and those things now are different to what they were. But if you wanted to give somebody an idea of what makes me tick, then I would look at the composition of Cartier-Bresson, I would look at the composition of Alex Webb, I would look at the artiness of somebody like William Klein or Antonin Kratochvil or Paolo Pellegrin or any of those guys. They're the kind of things that I would look at.
If I, let's say, set a goal for 10 years from now to become the next Jeff Ascough, what would the recipe be?
Don't try and be Jeff Ascough. It's as simple as that. Just try and be yourself. My wife started shooting with me 2 years ago, and one of the easiest things in the world would have been to make her a little version of me, you know. And right from the first time she took a photograph, and I honestly believe in 10 years' time she'll be a better photographer than me. She's that good. But her style is nothing like mine. It's totally different to mine. It's much more based on Tony Ray Jones, Martin Parr, that great British social documentary style of photography that was happening 20, 30 years ago. And it was important to her right from the beginning to create her own eye and her own style. And I think that's something that's so important. If you decide you're going to emulate somebody, then you always end up being not as successful, because you're trying to force your eye and your skills down a certain path. If you want to get to a level where we are, I guess, if you like, I'm sitting here being interviewed, for example, if that's what your goal is, then it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of dedication, and you have to literally live and breathe photography, which is what I've done for the past 25 years and still do today. I remember with Don McCullen in France, and Don, every moment, this guy was 77, 78 at the time, every time he had a moment off, he had his nose in a photography book, or he was watching something on an iPad, or it was just all the time. And he kind of said that, you know, this is why he's a photographer, because it's not just taking the pictures, it's the whole absorbing the photography and developing appreciation. So, but that's the thing, hard work, dedication. And the other thing as well is, don't let people say what you're doing is wrong.
That's hard.
It is, but I remember sitting around a table, 99, 2000, and I was at an awards ceremony in the UK, and I was sitting next to an eminent photographer at the time, and we were on this table, and I said to him, what do I need to do to be recognised by the association? And he said, you've got to do this, you've got to be able to show you can control the pictures, you've got to be able to show you can pose the bride and groom, and you can go like that. And at that point I thought, he doesn't understand what we do. And it's very easy to get knocked back, and I've always believed that what I've done is right, and for me, I've always believed it's the right thing to do, and I'm happy with what I do, and that has kind of held me in good stead for what I've been doing over the last few years.
I must say I thank you so much for this interview and for this opportunity to hear you tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I know you for like a century now, from those DVDs, Masters.
Yeah, it's 2003, was that? Yeah.
I must admit, I thought about you, he's a fancy guy with some fancy cameras. I was more drawn to Jay Gurnis' style.
Yeah.
But I'm older now, and I tend to value more the kind of memories you create and those more or less staged things, and it's a huge honor for me to meet you.
It's a pleasure, been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you
Absolute
so much.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.